Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very, very accomplished professional from USA, Helané Wahbeh. Helané, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ash. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Helané is the Director of Research at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. She's an author, and all of you know I'm very partial to authors. She's an author of a book titled The Science of Channeling, Why You Should Trust Your Intuition and Embrace the Force That Connects Us. So, Helané, before we start talking about the Institute of Noetic Sciences, tell me in brief your own journey.
I began my life as a very sensitive being. I felt, when I'd walk into a room, I'd feel the energy in the room. I felt like I would get information that I didn't know where it was coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And I was raised in a very eclectic background where my mother had a very esoteric spiritualist type background.
Okay.
And my father had a Greek Orthodox Christian background. So I had this very diverse, rich spiritual background. I was very inspired to learn about how the body works. So I went to naturopathic medical school.
Wow.
And was focused on mind-body medicine and how the mind affected the body, and received postdoctoral research fellowships so that I could explore that more deeply, this curiosity of how meditation works, how the mind influences the body.
Amazing.
So because of my unique background and my academic training, they kind of clashed because I couldn't go into these deeper conversations, deeper research questions. And that's where the Institute of Noetic Sciences came in.
Fantastic. So now tell me a little bit about the Institute of Noetic Sciences. How did it start and what is its mission?
It began in 1973. It was founded by Edgar Mitchell, who was an Apollo 14 astronaut. And he was the sixth person to walk on the moon. He was on the moon. He did his job on the moon, and he was coming home and his capsule was spinning. He was seeing the sun, the moon, the stars. And he had this incredible transcendent experience where he felt he was part of everything and everything was part of him. So as an engineer, he was like, what is this? I have no idea what this is. So he returned home and decided to found the Institute of Noetic Sciences, or IONS, which is the acronym we use. And its mission is to explore this interconnected nature of reality through scientific exploration and personal discovery. And we call that the noetic handshake, this balance of the science and the direct experience. And so it's been doing that work for about 50 years now.
Wow. Wow. And when you were telling me about the astronaut and his experience with something which seemed to be, if I can use the word, outside the body or connecting with the universe, is that what you call a noetic experience?
What noetic is comes from a Greek origin that means inner wisdom. And what's fascinating, and many traditions around the world believe that the universe is within, right? And so the outside reflects the inside. So noetic really refers to this inner wisdom, this inner experience. And so you might be wondering, well, how does channeling relate to noetic? One of the great difficulties I had when I came into this field was terminology, because there's so many different words and definitions about how we as humans, which I believe is our innate capacity, can access information and energy from beyond our five senses, from beyond space and time. Now, this shows up for people in different ways. Many people can admit to having an intuitive hunch or a gut hunch that just about everyone's like, oh yeah, I had this hunch and I followed it and it turned out to be real. So that's what I would call channeling, a very common form of channeling or a noetic experience. On the other side of the spectrum, you have more rare experiences like mediumship, where the person believes that they are connecting to a deceased human, or something called trance channeling, where the person believes that their body is being used as a vehicle for a non-physical entity to communicate through. Now, those are obviously more rare on the spectrum. And then you have everything in between, like a precognitive dream, or you have a dream about something from the future that came through, or being able to know what someone's thinking. These experiences are incredibly common, and there's just a lot of taboos about talking about them.
Well said. Well said. And you just talked to me about channeling, but how did you learn about channeling?
So I believe that all people can channel, and that the way that it looks for them is unique. Their expression of it is unique, and what I call that the noetic signature, and we can get into that. But the way I learned about it was from my own felt experience, but also from my mother's side of the family. My mother is a trance channeler. My grandmother was. Every member of my mother's side of the family has some type of clear channeling ability. And so I was raised in that environment, but it was something that I always just, oh, that's my personal life. I don't really bring that into my work life.
Okay. And when you say that, large part of your family from your mother's side had experiences of channeling, can you give me something for my viewers and listeners, and as an example of what you have faced or you have experienced?
Me personally?
Yeah.
For example, I might meet someone and it's the first time I've ever met them. And as I shake their hand, I just receive all this information about their hopes, dreams, desires, their background. And I'm able to, check in with them to see if it's true and find that it's true. In my private practice, when I was a naturopathic physician working with patients, I would have similar experiences where they would be telling me about a symptom. I would be taking their history, and I would receive this download of information about where this pathology originated. And I would probe a little bit, and often they would start crying and emoting and releasing about this traumatic experience from their past, just as an example.
Amazing.
So I also have a very simple intuitive clue is I get goosebumps on my skin. And many people have shared with me that they experience that as well.
Yeah.
When they know something is true, they get goosebumps.
Well said. And what is the difference between channeling and being a psychic?
So the way that I define channeling is of this very broad umbrella term, which is this process of accessing information and energy from beyond our conventional notions of time and space that can appear receptive and expressive. And with that broad definition, psychic is included in that. So it really depends who you talk to and this kind of confusion about the terms.
And you mentioned very briefly that there are some taboos.
Yes.
What are some of these taboos?
I think the taboos is that people are afraid to talk about it. So when I first started lecturing on the topic of channeling, I would have people come up to me afterwards and say, oh, I'm so glad you shared about this. I had this experience. I haven't been able to share with anybody. I'm afraid they're going to think I'm crazy. Okay, so one piece is, that people who have these experiences have a psychological pathology, which numerous studies show that that's not necessarily true, that most people who have these experiences are very well adjusted, happy, high functioning people in their lives. There's also this piece around our current paradigm is materialistic, which means that the only thing that exists is the material. Well, everything channeling is immaterial. You can't touch it with and can't sense it with our five senses. And so people would say, oh, it's just impossible. So why even go there? It's impossible. There's a taboo about even exploring these research questions. And then, of course, historically, our human culture has killed, tortured, ostracized people who have demonstrated these abilities. So I think that there is a kind of ancestral red flag about coming out of the channeling closet, as I call it.
Very interesting. My next question is that, and I know you've given a few responses on this, but where does this channeled information come from?
That is a great question. The quickest answer is we aren't sure. We don't know. There are lots of theories. One is that it's coming from ourselves. It's some higher self, some larger aspect of ourself that is giving us that information. Other people believe that there are non-physical beings, multidimensional beings or deceased people or spirits, etc., that can communicate with us in these different ways and give us information. And some people believe that there's like an interconnected web amongst all of us that we can tap into. I imagine that it may be a little bit of all of these, depending on the situation. And I invite people to, because we don't have the tools to exactly know what the source is, to focus more on the content. And if the content is actually useful to them and practical and will help improve their lives in some way.
And, a lot of people talk about, you spoke about goosebumps. There is the thing about sixth sense, as people say. Would that be something similar to, having an experience or getting your sixth sense to say that, this is what may have happened or may happen?
Yes, absolutely. That would be, to me, an example of channeling, of this noetic wisdom. And I think my invitation to the listener is to be open and curious about what their unique expression of this is. And that's what I alluded to. I call this the noetic signature.
Yeah.
That we all have the capacity to channel, have this sixth sense or whatever you want to call it, but that the way it shows up for us is different. And for me, I might get goosebumps. I might get these downloads. Perhaps you might see colors around people, or you might see things visually, or you might hear a voice telling you to not go through the intersection, and then all of a sudden an 18-wheeler comes racing through. So it shows up very differently for people. And my invitation to everyone is to be curious about what their noetic signature is. Be aware and mindful and start tuning into how those intuitive hunches show up for them.
Fascinating. And how does one understand or even begin to understand what is one's noetic signature?
I think the first step is to set the intention and to become aware that this exists, that it exists within themselves, and to start paying attention.
Okay.
We also at IONS have developed the Noetic Signature Inventory that is a validated questionnaire that people can take. We have an open study right now if people want to participate to take it for free, and we send them a report that basically lays out what their signature looks like along 12 different characteristics.
Okay.
And they get to see what that's all about.
Wow, I must try it out immediately after our conversation. But also, Helané, there is a lot of scientific evidence for psychic phenomena. Why do you think more people don't know about this?
I think it relates to the taboos that I mentioned. I think it is this, we are shifting, paradigms are shifting from the materialist to the most post-materialist. And from when I first started in this field, which was 7 years ago, very recently, it's already changed. More and more people are feeling open to learn and learn about the hundreds and hundreds of research studies that have evaluated this in the laboratory and in people's daily lives. There's an excellent paper in the American Psychologist that is a meta-analysis review of the various psychic phenomenon. And some people don't understand that there's already quite a bit of scientific evidence about these topics, and they're afraid to talk about it. And I think also people are a little bit afraid because imagine if we could all read each other's minds.
Amazing.
All the time. That would dramatically shift our culture.
Correct.
Immediately. It would force us to be very vigilant about our mental thoughts. And so it's very profound to think about the implications of us immediately becoming very, very psychic.
Absolutely. Imagine taking transparency to that level where you know exactly what I'm thinking. I mean, then, that is quite an amazing kind of a thing to visualize. But moving forward, Helané, you also talk a lot about consciousness. What is the science of consciousness and why is it important?
It's integral to these topics that I'm sharing with you today, because in a materialistic worldview, our consciousness is an artifact of our brain, of our neurons, and it's housed within our brain. It can't go beyond our brain. And so what we find through channeling is there's all this evidence that our consciousness definitely transcends our brain. It can access information from halfway across the world. It can sense what people are thinking. It can sense beyond time into the future, knowing things about the past that it couldn't possibly know. And so our work at IONS is really about evaluating this concept of non-local consciousness. That our brain may be a tool that perhaps filters consciousness, is necessary in our human body to house consciousness, if you will, but it is not the originator of it, and that our consciousness goes far beyond our physical brain and our body.
Correct. And, as you were talking, I've been thinking that there is a lot of wisdom in the traditional ancient civilizations, whether it is Greece, whether it is India, whether it's China. How much of that knowledge are you really being able to draw upon for IONS?
That is a wonderful question, because it feels like the Western world is just catching up on some level through this scientific lens. And one of my kind of dream projects, I'm very much about collaboration, about synergy. And if we had the person power and the resources, it would be incredible to pull out all the common threads about these human potential and psychic abilities, etc., from all the different traditions around the world. Because in so many cultures, it's just a given. Oh yeah, of course, humans can do this.
Correct.
We don't focus on it because we don't want to get stuck on it. But this is definitely a capacity that humans can have.
Fascinating. Let me now move to your book. Your book is titled The Science of Channeling, Why You Should Trust Your Intuition and Embrace the Force That Connects Us. Is this book available on Amazon?
It's available on Amazon. It's also an audio book. Okay. So for those who don't like to read, you can listen to it. Okay. We also have a course at IONS, and I'm about to launch a course in February through the Shift Network on the same material. Now, the book is based on the IONS channeling research program that I developed when I first started at IONS, building on the previous work that IONS did and others as well. And it's focused on research studies that we conducted on a number of important research questions. What do we already know about channeling? How common is it? Who can do it? How does it work? Is the content useful? And how can we support ourselves as individuals, if we choose to nurture our own channeling abilities to support us in our lives individually and beyond?
Fascinating. And Helané, my last question to you, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your amazing knowledge and your incredible journey, what would you say are 3 learnings or 3 lessons you want our viewers and listeners to take away?
Only 3? I have to only pick 3.
No,
I'm joking. I'm joking.
Yeah.
That you are more than you may believe yourself to be. To nurture your ability, even if it's a minute a day, to become still and quiet and go within. And that the power of belief and intention can affect the physical world. And that when you set your intention to tap into your channeling abilities, your next step on this wonderful exploration journey will unfold.
Wonderful. And on that note, and your lessons, you're more than you may believe it to be. The power of belief and intention can in fact impact the physical world. Thank you, Helané, for speaking to me. Thank you for talking to me about your journey, about Noetic Sciences, which, just to reiterate, is inner wisdom. Thank you for talking to me about channeling and all the wonderful examples that you've given me about channeling. Thank you also for speaking to me about consciousness and your book. Thank you again, and good luck.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for The Brand Called You.